Welcome back, troglodytes, to the Trogly Guitar Show. My name is Billy Morrison. I play guitar for Billy Idol, and today he is looking at my Billy Morrison signature Les Paul.
Well, wasn't that just a fantastic treat? Thank you so much, Billy, for doing the intro to this video, as well as giving us a little bit of behind-the-scenes information that we'll hear a little bit later on. So obviously, if I've got Billy on the show and he told you I'm reviewing his signature guitar, that must be what we're doing today. But there's a good story behind this. So I got a private help session on my website one day from a viewer of the show who was looking to buy a Billy Morrison signature Les Paul. Now, he's actually friends with Billy, so he sent him a message to see if that one was a good one to pick, and Billy said, no, man, you don't want that one. And to be fair, it was a little bit beat up. But Billy told him, hey, I've actually got one in storage I was thinking about selling. He played a little bit on stage. It was an extra one, he didn't necessarily need it, so he offered it to his friend, and after helping them come up with a good, fair value for both parties, the new owner of this one asked me, hey, do you just want Billy to ship this to you and you can document it? I was like, sure, why not? Do you think Billy wants to do the intro? And yeah, it just all ended up working out. So here it is. Yeah, I think it's safe to say this thing has traveled around a little bit. It's a bit beat up, but hey, we get to see the cool Billy Morrison case here. So it's kind of a Union Jack vibe going on. Not quite as colorful as my Explorer Union Jack, but according to the Gibson spec sheets, that's what they were going for here. It has his name on it, Billy Morrison, and all of his own personal tags from within his collections. You can see them all over the case. Let's go ahead and get this beast open, because this one will have a few different specs as compared to a stock original one. But I'm excited to finally get to document this strange guitar. Oh wow, that is really, really yellow. So I've only ever seen these things in stock photos, but now that I've seen this one in person, it's like, okay, there are definitely a few unique attributes to this guitar that I think needs more heavily documented. Because that was the big reason I wanted to get Billy's take on this, is because I could never find like an actual interview where he talks about his whole design process of these things. So I'm going to let Billy tell you the story as to why he chose this finish.
The guitar is an off-white, nicotine white, as I like to put it. It's a tip of the hat to the Steve Jones signature model. Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols, obviously the reason I play guitar. And I just wanted to give a nod towards that kind of massive influence that guy had on my playing.
Next up on the question block, why the matching headstock?
This white headstock, cream headstock, matching the whole guitar, took about 2 years to get approval for. There was some patent and copyright issues, and I was really adamant that I wanted the headstock to match the body, and it took a couple of years to get it all approved, and they had to retool or find, there was some issue about finding black perloid for the logo, and we got it done.
So very cool. Awesome to know about where these influences came from. So my first impressions on this thing is it's just so blingy. I like the way how he calls it tobacco white. It definitely has a very yellowed hue in person. And I didn't even realize that this version had the golden fret wire. That's probably the nicest looking gold frets I've seen on a Gibson. Because we've seen them on other examples like the Lzzy Hale Explorers and a few other ones like I think the Gibson Vegas series. Some of the Les Paul Supremes even have it. But it works really well with this off-white finish. It's cool. And having that black perloid for the Gibson logo and the crown looks extra nice. I never really thought too much about that, but I like how the binding, even though it's still slightly aged itself, it's very white in comparison to everything else, so it really helps it stand out even more. The chambered body makes it pretty nice and light as well. Now he was telling me that he made some modifications to this one, so I'll let him tell that tale as well.
A couple of differences between the guitar I'm holding and the guitar he's got. The pickups in this are the original pickups that came with my signature model. When I changed to the Friedman heads, it didn't sound how I wanted it to sound, so I swapped out for a pair of slash pearly gates, which seemed to work a lot better. That's what he's got. Other than that, the guitar is built for playing rhythm, really. I'm a rhythm guitar player. Chunky chords, and I've got massive fat fingers here. So I use the Dunlop jumbo fret wire. Sounds great, chunky rhythm.
It's special because Billy actually signed it to his friend there for 2022, which is funny because it's 10 years after the serial number on this one. Billy must sign a lot of stuff because he's got great penmanship. I like that signature. And despite obviously being used, he took good care of this one. Like, we've got some buckle worming on the back, but that just makes it legit. But the top is very clean, which is unique on one of these white finishes because generally they get finish checking everywhere. But I do want to talk about this case a little bit more. It's custom. Normally you don't get all these like extra inserts and padding here. It's a little bit more rigid of a foam that they used. This really kind of reminds me of like the Dusk Tiger case, just the way it's a little bit wider. I mean, that really form fits to the guitar, so that's something special about these. Interesting. It's made in USA, so it must have been a TKL made variation. And it's got a slightly larger pocket than normal. Unfortunately, no case candy or anything like that, but this was likely one of his artist guitars that were supplied to him. But when these were first offered at stores, they were $2,799 brand new. However, if you're looking to get one of those yet today, yeah, good luck. These things have become rare collectibles. A, because it's an artist signature model that has been out of production for over 10 years now, so it's got some collectability factors to it for that. However, there's actually an interesting story that Billy will tell you with this as well.
This has a rosewood fretboard, and I think the fretboard on the one he's got is a maple fretboard. There was, when this guitar was being manufactured, it was highly publicized. There was a raid on the Gibson factory where my guitar was on the conveyor belt at the time, and about 100 of these that were meant to be produced and out into the marketplace got confiscated. So first of all, this is a lot rarer than it would have been. There's 100 less than we had scheduled to release, and that's why there's some differences in the fretboard, because the ones after that had a maple fretboard.
Now, how many of these were actually made? Generally, signature guitars around this era would be between, 300 to 400. According to Billy, initially there was meant to be 250 of these things produced. So almost half the run got axed there. And of the remaining models, he got about 15 of them. So you won't find too many of these rare beasts. But let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs before we get to that playing demo. Inside the Billy Morrison Les Paul, let's see what other secrets we can find. So as promised, the pickups have been replaced in this particular one. We have a Seymour Duncan /APH2N, and our bridge pickup is another Seymour Duncan, which is the SHPG1B, so the Pearly Gates bridge, and the Alnico 2 /signature neck pickup. But the original pickups in here were also Seymour Duncans. It was the 59 and JB set. You can find that in a whole bunch of guitars. Those are relatively easy to replace if somebody wanted to, but I mean, Billy Morrison ordered for this to be done, so I bet the owner will just end up leaving that alone. But here's what our neck pickup cavity looks like. Not too much to talk about, but you can see that it has a short neck tenon, and this is what our bridge pickup cavity looks like. Now we can see some sort of writing in here from the factory, symbolizing something of Billy Morrison's signature Les Paul, but you're also going to see these marks right here. So it appears that Billy might have added these himself or had his tech do it. These are little foam blocks to make it so the pickup doesn't wiggle. So take this out, put this in, you can see it wiggles. Probably kind of annoying. Now there's two different ways to go about fixing those issues. A, you can get ridiculously tight springs on your legs, or B, you can just stuff something in there, whether that be foam, paper towels, whatever you want. And being a rhythm player, that makes complete sense why he would want that, for the pickup not to move as much. But inadvertently, this foam is actually reacting to the finish, and that's why it's kind of more yellow right there. It's the same phenomenon that happens when you put a nitro guitar on a stand that just has the rubber foam and you get the stand rash marks right there. So kind of interesting to see there. But just for fun, our pickups within the circuit, bridge pickup reads 7.9 k ohms, our neck position 7.78, and the middle position for fun 3.92. The official spec sheet for these actually says it has a special bridge and tailpiece setup, but it didn't actually say what. But what was on this one is a locking Tone Pro system, so you have these two securing bits right here. What that does is it secures to the shaft of the post right here, so you can lock in your setup, so if you're changing strings, you don't accidentally mess that up, and it's supposed to give you better vibration into the body because it's a tighter fit. The exact same thing is true on the tailpiece as well, but you can actually see the Tone Pro's branding on this. And you have your securing bits right here and right there. Gibson using stock Tone Pro's parts. This is kind of the era when they started to do that on quite a few. But now that we understand the electronics and the hardware, let's just take a second to appreciate the beauty of this nice off-white finish. I love the contrast of the stark white binding. Well, stark white in this case anyways. I'm sure it's not perfectly white, but it looks like it as comparison to the rest of this, banana cream finish that they've got going on. I was always kind of so-so about this particular model myself. But now that I've seen one in person, yeah, I definitely probably want to pick one of these up for my own collection one day. But the knobs on this one, it looks like they're pretty well cracked in half. It wouldn't surprise me if it's because of the case being so rigid foamed. And form fit, if you ever get like a ding on the case when you're walking around, it could definitely crack those knobs further. But 2 volumes, 2 tones, nothing too crazy. And before we move on from the body, you actually have custom style binding along up here, despite being more so a Les Paul standard as far as the neck goes. This really reminds me of one of the classic customs from this era, because some of those had the same headstock style as far as the inlays go, but obviously different colors. Not that we can see this, but it does have a 2-piece maple top with a chambered out mahogany body, which sometimes chambered guitars, they sound good, sometimes they don't. You just gotta try example to example. But so far, this one feels right. The body's light, but the neck isn't overpowering, so I'll be interested to see how this one plays. But moving on from the body, we have the neck. So if you go to like old Sweetwater listings or Musician's Friend, anything like that, the official spec sheet calls them ebony fretboards. And Mr. Morrison kind of dove into that story of the whole confiscated things, but that is when ebony stopped getting used on Gibson guitars. And then we started to get into the alternative woods era when they used Richlight. So Richlight reigned supreme from about 2011 until 2019 into early 2020 before they switched it back to ebony. So it's interesting to find that he didn't actually opt to do the Richlight. Maybe they hadn't thought of that yet, or he didn't want to, because when he said this is a maple fretboard, what he was actually saying is it's a baked maple fretboard. That's why it's that darker color, and I love baked maple boards. You could find them on like the Buckethead Les Paul Studio as well. They have a velvety smooth feel to them. I've come to really like baked maple fretboards, which is different from roasted maple, by the way. It all depends how you cook it. I guess his own personal one that he was playing is actually a rosewood fretboard. And even though the inlays look blindingly light, they're not true mother of pearl, they're just the acrylic. And then yes indeed, we do have those golden frets that just match this guitar so well. And normally you see gold frets on like Richlight boards or ebony boards, but I think maybe this is the first time I've seen it contrast against brown and match the finish and the white. It all just kind of comes together. I like it. Got your typical 24 3/4 inch scale length with a 12-inch fretboard radius. As far as our neck specs here, the nut measures 1.69 inches, then up by the 12th, 2.08. First fret neck depth, 0.86, and surprising, 0.91 by the 12th. It was advertised as a 60 slim taper. Here's what that neck profile looks like at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Nice rounded and a little bit wide feeling. So now let's talk about our headstock here. I found it funny that they just completely painted over the truss rod, but yeah, even that is matching white. And the truss rod covers themselves have the matching Billy Morrison right here, with kind of an interesting font. I like it. Looks like about 5-ply binding around our headstock, and then you'll actually see this particular one is marked by him with the label maker 447. Which you can also see here on his case in multiple locations. So what that means to me is maybe this was his 7th one that he got. We'll have to check if that 440 matches like the last 3 digits in the serial number or something. But yes, indeed, that is a black perloid material, which looks pretty good on this, the whole contrast. Moving on to the backside, found another modification. I doubt Gibson did this nice shielding job. Occasionally you do find it, but in the era that they did do this, it was generally the black, so this was likely that something he had his tech do. But surprisingly enough, he left the stock Gibson pots alone, just swapped out the pickups. Everything else was satisfactory to him. Another giveaway that it's not a factory job is somebody did it very nicely to the backplate as well. You've got your golden jack plate and golden strap buttons in our usual locations, which are Schallers in this case. And you're going to notice, just like a standard, it only has binding on the front. So it's kind of like a blend between standard and custom, since we do not have any binding back here. You can see your toggle switch in here. But as I was showing you earlier, yes, we do have some buckle worming marks, but nothing straight through the finish, so he takes care of his guitars that he plays. Looks like we've got a couple of marks from his strap right here too. But everything else, very respectable. Move up the backside of the neck, just a couple of marks here and there, nothing too crazy. Then we've got his signature back here, which most of these do not have. But this particular one was made in 2012, and that 440 must mean something else because the last digits appear to be 596, made on the 114th day of 2012 initial batch. But hey, these actually come stock with locking Grover tuners. That's a nice touch. It's always fun to blacklight artist guitars because some of them actually put marks on their guitars. Like the Steve Howe episode, I actually found his signature on the back of the headstock in a blacklight pen. Apparently he does that with a lot of his. Now, so far, I'm not seeing anything, but it is cool to see how the pure white binding does glow under blacklight. Other times, artists will mark them within the cavities, because then it's not as obvious and somebody won't accidentally wipe it off. But I already put it back together, and I don't see anything showing up here. All said and done, this one weighs 8 pounds even. We've heard how Mr. Morrison can play it. Let's see how I can play it. So far, I've been having a lot of fun with this thing. I'm just going to demonstrate some tones for you, starting with our neck pickup. Really like the neck pickup on this one. I definitely agree with this change. Bridge is nice and bitey. You'll see that in the distorted section here in a minute. In the middle position, somewhere in between. Let's kick on some dirt. Now that we know all about the Billy Morrison Les Paul signature, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Something about this one really called to me. It just made me want to play a whole bunch of other songs. I mean, not just like Billy Idol tunes. I was doing some Daft Punk, a little bit of Tenacious D. We had a whole bunch of stuff with this one. It just has the tones that just goes for everything. I really like baked maple fretboards. They're nice and smooth like I was telling you before. This is one of those really good chambered Les Pauls. It's not too light, but not overly heavy. It sits on a strap very comfortably. I mean, it really does remind me of the Buckethead Les Paul in a way, because of the whole fretboard, the whole whited out vibe, but it's just a little bit different. And even though this particular signature guitar never necessarily spoke to me before, having it in the flesh really helps you appreciate it more so than others. I mean, matching headstock Les Paul, you don't see that too often, and this was one of the first in order to do that. As far as like a production run, limited edition signature thing, I'm always careful when I say the first, because there's like, well, what about this custom order from 1980 or something, you know? So Billy, thank you for being part of today's review and demo and for selling this guitar to a viewer of the show. It was great to document it, but now I need to pack it up and say goodbye. Let me know if you got another spare one. I might want one. All right, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.